All right, here we go. Another morning at the Digital Cathedral. I want to welcome you from wherever around the country, around the world, you're with us this morning. It's always good to have new people tune in and watch. It seems like multitudes and multitudes of people are beginning to catch on to this message that is sweeping the earth of God's goodness, God's love, the grace of God that knows no limits. It's free from law, lets you out of the box, and once you're out of the box, there's no way you're getting back in. So I want to start over in 2 Peter chapter 1 this morning. 2 Peter chapter 1, we're going to look at some things that I hope shake your world, rock your world a little bit, and stretch you out in some understanding as we are learning how to embrace our divinity. Embracing our divinity, this is part number 14. So here we go. 2 Peter chapter 1 and verse 3 says, "But as His divine power has given to us all things that pertain to life and godliness," and here's how it comes. All things that pertain to life and godliness come through the knowledge of Him who has called us to glory and virtue, by which this goodness has come to us, that gives us all things that pertain to life and godliness through the knowledge of God, by which have been given to us exceeding great and precious promises, that through these exceeding great and precious promises you might be a partaker of the divine nature, and through that divine nature, he says, that we have escaped the corruption that is in the world through lust. Now the key word in this whole passage, in these two verses, is the word partaker. It's the Greek word koinonos. It means simply to be a share, a participator, or a companion. So let's just break it down that way. He's saying that there have been given to us great and exceeding precious promises, and that as we embrace these promises and come into the knowledge of Him, that we are going to be a share, partaker, a partner in the divine nature. Now, folks, that's pretty strong when you think about it, that He has picked you up, brought you in, and set you in a position of being a companion, a share, a partaker, a participator in the very divine nature that He has Himself. And that's probably one reason why I spent the last 2 weeks doing something that I rarely do, which is repeat a couple of teachings. If you were with me the last 2 weeks, you know that we talked about identity, and I pulled up a couple of teachings from the past. I don't normally do that, but they fit in so well. And I felt like it was a good reminder for some, and I know that a lot of you have recently joined us here at the Digital Cathedral, so you're not all up to speed on everything that we teach. It just was a good basic, foundational, strong teaching to remind us of the fact that divinity is our identity. And in this passage of Scripture, Peter points it out so well that we are participators, we're sharers, we're companions in that divine nature. And I want to push it ahead just a little bit this morning. I want to challenge you to understand that as you embrace and demonstrate your divinity through your true identity, which is divinity, there's going to be an overwhelming trait that begins to bubble up in your life, and you're going to begin to notice it taking place, and it's going to begin to guide you in everything that you do. And this is what we're going to begin to push out into a little bit deeper water. We're down to part 14. I don't know how many parts we'll go. I'm guessing at least 50. But we're now beginning to push out a little bit. So I want to talk about a trait that is not naturally acquired, that is going to begin to bubble up and to guide your life as you learn how to embrace your divinity by walking in true identity. And that is a love for people, especially people that are in need. It's going to be an unconditional love. It's going to be a love that has no limits. Now I'm going to take this Sunday and next Sunday, I'm going to talk to you about this love, because it is not a natural love that we see demonstrated in people in daily living very often. One of the things that I hear from people that are beginning a grace walk that is free of all laws, that's free of religion, you've sprung free, like I said a couple of minutes ago, you're out of all of that mess, and man, this thing is spreading around the world big time. One of the responses I get almost invariably from people that are beginning to move into this kind of level of teaching is that I find myself, here's what people say, I find myself loving people more and more. That's one of those effortless changes that come into your life through a divine influence that He initiates, and the only thing that you've been doing is resting in Him. One of the changes that you begin to notice that begins to take place in your life, and I hear it all the time from people, is that people tell me, say, you know what, I'm beginning to love people that I never loved before. It's not that I hated them, it's just that now I'm beginning to feel this inner love, this inner reaching out to them, especially people that I see that have needs. So as we begin to have a sense that the Father is demonstrating His love through us and as us, as this divinity is embraced by us, it simply begins to happen. It simply begins to be. Now, it's foreign to most of us because most of us have loved on two levels, all right? We've loved on one level. We've loved people that love us back. That's a brotherly love. The Greek word for that is phileo. It's a brotherly love. Philadelphia, city of love. It's from that Greek word. So we're kind of accustomed to that love that says, I scratch your back, you scratch my back. Then there's the other kind of love that we're familiar with, that's a very selfish love that says, I love you because of what you can do for me. I love you because you're meeting a need that I have in my life. And as long as you meet that need in my life, I love you. I mean, how could I not love you for doing something for me that I need to have done? But when it comes down to this unconditional love, it goes beyond the brotherly love of I like you because you like me, and as long as you like me, I like you, and I love you as long as you love me, or the love that says I love you because of a job you're performing for me, or a task, or a benefit that you're giving to me. I really love that. I love you because of what you're providing me. But as we start demonstrating love as divinity, it's a love that's very foreign to us. The word is agape, and I know that you've heard agape love a gazillion times in your church life. But I don't think we've really gotten a handle on it as to how it develops and how it evolves. So what I want to do in this teaching, and I'll carry it over into next week, I want to talk about some very practical things that I've discovered. And honestly, I'm working through some of these things in my life right now. But what I want to do this week and next week, hopefully, is to release you into that flow of love that will empower you to be as Jesus is in this present world. Jesus said that this love of the Father, this Father kind of love, will be what brings a revelation to the world of the Father Himself. And we're going to look at some scripture this morning, and I want to start over in John chapter 13. Jesus said that this love is a powerful love, and it's this love that actually begins to point Jesus to the Father. Look what He says in John chapter 13, verse 34. John chapter 13, verse 34, Jesus said, a new commandment I give you, that you love one another. Now here's the kind of love that we're to demonstrate for one another. He finishes the verse off, and he says, I want you to love one another as I have loved you. The love that Jesus demonstrated toward us was not a brotherly love. He didn't love us because we loved Him. He didn't love us because of some benefit we were giving to Him, or a job that we were performing, or something that we were doing that He could gain from. He says, I want you to love as I've loved you. And we know that the love that He had for us was an unconditional love. It carried no stipulations to it. It was one way. It came to us without expecting even a response from us to the love that He extended. So He said, here's the kind of love that I want you to love with. In that 34th verse, He says, this is a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. And then He says in verse 35, and this is so powerful, this is so key. He said, by this shall all men know that you are my disciples, if you have love one for another. So the thing that's going to bring revelation to the world that we are disciples, that we are in fact embracing identity, that we're carrying a reflection of the Father, where we can say, if you have seen me, you have seen the Father, is going to be this love that is not brotherly, that is not based on benefiting of myself only. It's going to be a love that comes without condition. It comes one way, and it's going to be the same kind of love that we love one another with as He has loved us. Now the church has spent, isn't it amazing, we have spent billions and billions of dollars on evangelism. There are all kinds of evangelistic programs today. I remember going through Evangelism Explosion. We've walked down the Roman road. We've done all kinds of things to try to entice people to come into the kingdom, when Jesus gives a very simple formula that actually costs nothing in dollars. Jesus said the most effective evangelistic tool that you can have to reach the lives and the hearts of people is to demonstrate the same kind of love for one another that I have demonstrated for you. Now let's talk about that love. Let's talk about how that love develops and how it evolves in us to flow out of us to other people. Now this is where we begin to walk out into some deeper water, and this is where we begin to have to embrace our divinity. So if you haven't kept up with me through the last 14 weeks, I'm going to challenge you to go back and pick up the weeks you've missed. I know that some of you think you're so advanced that you can just jump in here at 14 and be up to speed. Well, you can't. I've talked about some things we have built each week, line upon line upon line, and I think we're ready to launch now into this idea that we have got to begin to reflect and show the love of the Father to other people. But how do we do it? How does it develop and how does it evolve? If you're like me, you have probably done your best to love people and you failed. You've done your best to extend, an unconditional love, but it hasn't worked. You've tried hard, time and time again. You've got up in the morning and you've said, you know what, I'm going to love people today, or you've made a New Year's resolution. I don't know when you're looking at this, but actually I'm doing this in the early part of 2019 in January. So a lot of you made a resolution. Maybe some of you made a resolution that my attitude and my love toward people is going to be different this year. I'm going to begin to love like Jesus loves. I'm going to begin to love unconditionally. And by January 3rd, you've already blown it. It hasn't worked. You've tried and tried and tried and tried. You've heard about unconditional love, but it hasn't worked very well for you in your life. All right? So let me just start at some basics this morning. Let me start at some basics. Let's understand this. Let's agree on this. That not only is God love, John said God is love. But let's agree this morning that all love is of God. Not only is God love, but any love that is demonstrated or comes from God. It is of God. In fact, John said this. In 1 John, let me prove it to you from the Bible. 1 John chapter 4, verse 7, he said, Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God. And everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. And he who does not love does not know God, for God is love. So in the 7th verse, he tells us that all love that comes that is of the God kind has a point of origination. It has a source point, and that's from God. It is of God. There's one source of this love. And then he says God is love. So let's put it like this. God is love, and that love that God is the source of will come and manifest itself through people. But I'm driving home here that there's only one point of origination for this love. It only comes from the Father. It doesn't come from people. Now this is important that we understand this. Because all of our spiritual life, we've been taught, we've been encouraged and told we need to love more. We need to accept more. We need to be more just. We need to be more kind. Now listen to me very closely. Listen. It doesn't lie within your power or ability to do any of those things. You cannot love more. You cannot be more kind. You cannot be more just. You cannot be more merciful. Let me say it again. God is love, and all love is of God. All right? So He's pure love. You know, it's like 100% pure chocolate. There is no vanilla in the chocolate. It's just pure chocolate. God is love. He's pure love. And there's only one point of origination, one source of that love, and it is of God. So it doesn't lie within our power or our ability to do more of any of those things. It all comes from Him, source, based on what He is, which is love. Now, at any given time, you can't be more loving, more merciful, more charitable than you are at that point of consciousness. You can't be more than what you are at that moment. And this is where we get frustrated sometimes, because we try to be more than what we are in our development at that point. We try and be more than we are at that moment, and it's really mission impossible. You can't perform it. You can't pull it off. So we're giving out of love now to the full extent of our current capacity. And I'm probably going to say this 3 or 4 times because I want to make that point strong. You can't love more than your point of consciousness. You can't give more love than your capacity is holding right now. And I want to say this several times to take the pressure off of you. I want to take the condemnation and the guilt off of you that makes you feel when religion has beat you and told you that you need to be more loving. You just need to love everybody, you know? And so you get up in the morning saying, this is the day that I'm going to love everybody, and you make an honest effort. You begin to endeavor to move into that, and before the day's over, somebody has done something and you no longer love everybody. See, the truth is you can't give more than what you have at that point. Now, there is a way that you can increase that love capacity that you have, this God kind of love. You can increase it. But to increase it, we're going to have to put a plug in the love bucket that we have. There's a hole in our love bucket that drains the love that we have out of us. And we've got to plug that hole. And that hole in our love bucket is the desire to receive love from other people. That is the proven path of disappointment when you're looking for love from other people. Other people can't love you more than what they have received themselves. There's an old country song that I wrote down some of the lyrics to because I think it explains so well. It's a song, and I want you to listen to this with spiritual ears because the lyrics themselves are kind of carnal, but I want you to listen to it with spiritual ears. There's a lot of truth in this song about a guy that is looking for real love. And some of the lyrics go like this. He says, well, I've spent a lifetime looking for you. Here we are spiritualists. We spent a lifetime looking for real love. I spent a lifetime looking for you. Single bars and good time lovers were never true. Playing fool's games, hoping to win. Telling those sweet lies and losing again. I was looking for love in all the wrong places, looking for love in too many faces. Searching their eyes and looking for traces of what I'm dreaming of. Hoping to find a friend and a lover, I'll bless the day I discover another heart looking for love. And I was alone then, no love in sight. And I did everything I could to just make it through the night. I turned to a stranger, just like a friend, looking for love in all the wrong places. How many times have we looked to the stranger? You know, the stranger is the enemy, right? So we've looked to a stranger like he was a friend, and all the avenues a stranger could open up because we were looking for love in all the wrong places. Then you came knocking at my heart's door. Aren't you glad today that he came knocking at your heart's door? You're everything I've been looking for. No more looking for love in all the wrong places. Looking for love in too many faces. Now that I found a friend and a lover, I bless the day I discovered you. No more looking for love in all the wrong places. Man, I'm telling you something. There's a lot of good theology in that song. We have had a life that has been bent on looking for love in all the wrong places. We've been looking for people to try to plug that hole in our love bucket, and that hole has been so big that the love that we have has escaped out of us, and we haven't been able to fill it up with the God kind of love because the love we're expecting from other people. We've been looking for love in all the wrong places, including the church. So to ask people or to expect people to be more loving has failed to bring peace into our life. It's failed to bring peace into the earth. It's failed to bring reconciliation for thousands of years because we haven't had that love to give. There isn't but one way that I know to bring peace and to see the kingdom of God manifest, and that is thoroughly, totally through spiritual means. Now, if you're gonna move into this, then you're gonna have to take other people and set them aside and look to the Father totally alone as the source of your love. In other words, we're gonna have to take our gaze and set it over the heads of people. We're gonna have to see beyond them. We're gonna have to move into a transcendent life. We're gonna have to come up a little bit higher, one that is above. Because we realize now, we're beginning to see that all love comes from God, right? Not people. People can be a conduit for it to the extent that they've received it. But folks, maybe 80% brotherly love, 10% selfish love, and 10% God love. All right? So when they've given to you what they can give you, it's going to be all mixed together, and it's not going to be pure. But God will pipe His love through people, but it's a little bit like a hose. You know, a hose is not the source of the water. It's important to have a hose that's hooked up to the well. So you hook the hose to the well or to the faucet, and it will bring the water to where it needs to be. But if you go to Lowe's or Home Depot and buy a hose and stretch it out on the yard and expect that hose to produce water, you're going to be disappointed. All the hoses is a conduit. All right? It's not the source of water. And all we are is conduits of the love. We're not the source of love. And so when you look to people to be the source of love, you're in for some hurt. You're in for disappointment because they can't deliver. They're not the source. They can only be somewhat of a pipeline. So we don't look to people for that love. We look to the Father alone. There's one source. And the moment that we expect that depth of love to continually flow from another person or a group of people or a fellowship of people, we may not get love back from them on that level we're looking for. In fact, you may get rejection. You may get indifference. You might even get some hate. And so that disappointment that rises comes from a lot of different forms. And that's exactly, listen to me, that's how people get hurt in church. Thousands and thousands of people won't even come into a church. They want nothing to do with any kind of fellowship of people because they have been hurt. And do you know why they've been hurt? They've placed an expectation on people. They've looked to people to give them love, acceptance, affirmation, to give them assurance, to give them a pat on the back. And when the people can't deliver it, because they don't have that capacity, then we become offended, we become hurt, we become injured, we become disillusioned, and we say, well, you know, the church is just filled up with a bunch of hypocrites. No, people are not hypocrites. They only have a certain level of love that they've been able to invoke into their life to be able to give back out. And so when they give out the extent of the God kind of love that they have, then immediately they move over into that brotherly love that says, I love you because you love me back. But the moment you stop loving me back, then I stop loving you. Or we stop that love that says, man, you're doing a great job. You're helping me. You're getting me to where I want to go. Therefore, I love you. We move into that love, and that's the kind of love that disappoints and hurts us. That's why I'm saying to you this morning, as you embrace divinity, you're going to have to get your gaze above that and know that all love comes from one source, which is God. And get past this thing that when people don't meet our expectations, we become hurt and disappointed. I mean, I've dealt with people that have totally lost their faith because they've looked to people to get something that can only come from God. Are you hearing me? They're loving only to the capacity that they have at that time. And when that capacity at that time is not able to minister to us what we need, then we become disillusioned. Is that their fault? No, it's our fault because we've been looking to the wrong source. We've been looking to the wrong pipeline. So when we look to each other, here's what I'm trying to say. When we look to each other, we find a measure of love, but we also may find a big measure of injustice and inequality. The fact is, honestly, selfishness motivates a lot of us, most of us, maybe even all of us some of the time. We're naturally looking for self-interest. We're naturally looking for what is to my benefit. And it'll be that way until we rise above seeking good from man. So as you embrace your divinity, as you get that identity thing down and you begin to walk it out, and God begins to do something internally in you, not that you're trying to do it. And let me just say it again. Let me take the pressure, the condemnation, the guilt off of you. You cannot generate this kind of love yourself. It is an act of the Spirit of God within you. As you rest in Him, His divine influence creates change within you. And one of the changes that come within you is this ability now is to begin to love other people like He loves people. Embracing your divinity transcends your need of finding fulfillment from other people. And it now positions you that you can begin to give this kind of love that God has for them. I mean, think about it. Think about it. Jesus didn't look to the disciples for affirmation or love. As much as Jesus appreciated Martha and Mary, he didn't show up at Martha and Mary's doorstep and say, man, I've been so used, I've been so abused out there by people, I need you to love on me a while. Why didn't he look to the disciples for love? Why didn't he look to his friends, Martha and Mary, or others that ministered to him? Why did they allow them to go ahead and minister to him, but he didn't try to pull out of them the love that he needed? I'll tell you why. Because he knew that the source of his love was the Father, and he rose above what others couldn't give. And by getting connected to the Father's love, he became the conduit of that love to other people. Listen to me. You will give the love from the source that you receive. If the source of love that you receive is from people, then the only love you can give is people love. If you're connected to the Father, you can give the Father's love because you've received the Father's love. And you step back and you begin to see He's living as me, He's loving as me. It's not me that's doing the loving. It's not me that's doing the life. It's Him. All right? I think that's what Paul was driving at over in Galatians chapter 2 and verse 20. When Paul said this, in Galatians chapter 2 and verse 20. We haven't read this scripture in a while, but there's so much revelation in this. Galatians chapter 2 and verse 20, Paul says, I've been crucified with Christ. I've zeroed out. I'm not connected to my own life anymore. I've been crucified with Christ. It's no longer I who live, but it's Christ who lives in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God who loved me and gave Himself for me. Paul is saying, I have now connected myself to an entirely different source. What was it that drove Paul to love and to do everything that he did? It was the source he was connected to. He could give from that source. Paul wasn't looking to Barnabas. He wasn't looking to Timothy to love him. He wasn't looking to Barnabas or Timothy to supply his needs. He was looking to the Father. And as a result of that, he was able to give the love that he received. All right, now how do you know when this stuff starts to rear up? How do you know when it's developing in you? I'm going to tell you. Absolute sure way that you can know that the love of the God kind, the Father kind, to the exclusion of the brotherly love, I scratch your back, you scratch mine, or the love, I love you because of what you do for me. You can tell when the love of God is beginning to develop in your life. When you have rested in Him and His influence has created this effortless change in you. You haven't tried to stir this love up. You haven't tried to pump, push, and pull and make yourself more loving. I mean, there's nothing more nauseating than people that try to love that's not genuine. But there's a way that you can tell when it's beginning to stir in your life, and it's this. It's when you find yourself being moved with compassion without regard to receiving benefit back from the person. All right? Now, to do that, you've got to know that you, first of all, are loved by Him, and that's become your source of love. And so to know that you're loved from Him, you're going to have to know that you love yourself with that same love that does not put demands or expectations on yourself. Jesus in Mark chapter 12 said that there's a new commandment that I'm giving to you guys. And I want to read it to you. In Mark chapter 12 and verse 30, because it illustrates this very well. Mark chapter 12, verse 30, Jesus said, "And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. This is the first commandment." What's he saying? He's saying, look, there's one focus that you've got to have in life. This is where you get everything you need. All right? You take your heart, your soul, your mind, your strength, you focus it on Him. God is love. All love is of God. That's where the focus becomes. And he said, and the second is like it, that you love your neighbor as yourself. Now, how are you going to love your neighbor as yourself? It's because of the previous verse of where the focus has been. When the focus is on love, God is love, all love is of God. When the focus is there and the stream is flowing in, only then can you begin to love your neighbor as yourself. Now we've taken that 31st verse, we've taken that 31st verse and we've told people, look, you need to love your neighbor as yourself, but we haven't taught them how to do it. And the only way you can do it is to plug yourself into a source of love that flows from you to somebody else. A source of love that you have not generated, you have not made happen yourself, but has come through you as a natural evolving of your connection to Him. Focus on Him creates flow. You can't generate it. All right, you have to know your source. And that was a key with Jesus. In John chapter 3, Jesus knew His source. I'm weaning you off of needing love from people today and next week. And once you wean yourself off of needing affirmation, love, confirmation from people, I'm telling you something, your life's going to get a lot easier and smoother, and you're going to iron out all of the ups and the downs and the depressions. John chapter 3, verse 35, Jesus said this. John chapter 3, verse 35. He said, the Father loves the Son. He was absolutely convinced of that. The Father loves the Son and has given all things into His hands. Right? He said, I've got one source. In chapter 5 and verse 20, he says much the same thing. He said, for the Father loves the Son and shows Him all things that He Himself has done and will show Him greater works than these that you may believe. Now, in John chapter 17, when Jesus prays, He's praying the same thing into your life that He has received in His life. The knowing of one source. The Father loves the Son. That was the testimony of Jesus. That was the confidence, the affirmation that Jesus gave Himself, that the Father loves the Son. And has put everything that the Father has into the hands of the Son. What else do you need? See, when you come to that place in life, then you no longer have to look to people for anything. And when you no longer have to look to people for something, that eliminates the disappointment, the hurt, the disillusionment, and the disruption that comes when people don't meet our expectations. So he prays over in John chapter 17, verse 24. He says, Father, I desire that they also, whom you gave me, may be with me where I am, that they may behold my glory, which you have given me. For you loved me, this should be your testimony, for you loved me before the foundation of the world. Man, that's a man that knows the source of love that he's come from. Then he goes on in verse 25, he says, O righteous Father, the world has not known you, but I have known you. And I pray that these might know that you have sent me. Verse 26, and I have declared to them your word and will declare it, watch, that declare it, that the love with which you loved me may be in them. All right, we just spent in John 3:35 and 5:20 seeing that Jesus had one source. Now, when he prays that great prayer in John 17, he's saying, I'm asking that the same love that you have loved me with may come into their consciousness. That they can rise up to see that same love. that source of love that Jesus had from the Father is what moved him with compassion. The way that you're going to know that the Father has loved you and that you now are a reciprocal and a pipeline of that love is now all of a sudden this compassion begins to come up into your life. And you know what compassion is? Compassion is a concern for the needs of other people without looking to that person for a return. If you want a real interesting study, go through Scripture. And you'll find that whenever Jesus was moved with compassion, that love manifested. That supply flowed. For example, in Matthew chapter 9 and verse 36, and I'm using quite a bit of Scripture today because I just want to nail this down for you. Matthew 9 in verse 36 is when Jesus saw the multitudes, he was moved with compassion for them because they were weary and scattered like sheep having no shepherd. So he became the shepherd. Then in chapter 14 and verse 14, Jesus said this, or Matthew said in Matthew 14:14, this is what he witnessed. When Jesus went out, he saw a great multitude and he was moved with compassion for them. And whenever Jesus was moved with compassion, supply was given. And watch, he was moved with compassion and he healed their sick. It was compassion that drove Jesus from the start of his life to the end of his life. Over in Luke chapter 4, verse 17 and 18, when Jesus started his ministry and he said, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he's anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor, to heal the brokenhearted, to set at liberty the captives." He went through about 8 or 9 things that he came to do. All of those things were needs that people had that Jesus was going to supply without expecting anything in return. All right? They all needed an outpouring of love. All of those 8 or 9 things in Luke chapter 4, verse 17 and 18. All of the oppressed, the brokenhearted, the needy, the poor, all of those that Jesus said, this is what I've come to do. He embraced his divinity and he met the needs. Now, what was his payback for it? They crucified him. They killed him. He had no return of the same love. Now, if you and I had been in that situation and we had healed the brokenhearted, set the captives free, brought deliverance to the poor where they weren't poor anymore, opened the eyes of the blind, all of those things, and we weren't appreciated for it, but in fact were killed for it, we would probably look at that group of people and say, you know what, after all I've done for you, after how far I've stretched myself out for you, this is how you repay me. This is what you nail me on a cross. The very same people in Luke chapter 4, verse 17 and 18 that he delivered, he healed, he did all of the ministry for, that he poured out his love for, they're the same people that crucified him. At crunch time, this is the way I'm dealt with. What was Jesus' response? Hanging on a cross, Jesus looked at him. He said, "Father, let's forgive them because they don't have any idea what they're doing." Yeah, I mean, the truth is Jesus didn't get very many thank yous. A story that I read, and every time I read it, I'm blown away, and I'm going, how could these people be so unappreciative of what Jesus has done? Let me read it for you real quick, and I'm going to start winding this down. In Luke chapter 17, verse 11, here's when you flow from this God kind of love, and let me tell you again, you don't have the capacity for it any greater than what you have right now. What your point of consciousness is, that's what you can expand. Don't feel guilty, don't feel condemned because you're not able to do more. Just do what you're able to do right now, knowing that it is the work of the Spirit of God that is within you that will increase the capacity. And the capacity is increased, listen to me, the capacity is increased as you put a hole in the bucket of love that requires you get love from other people. Jesus didn't require it. Jesus didn't need it because he was hooked to another source. He transcended above his need to be affirmed and loved by people. Now, I'm sure there were some people that loved him with an unconditional love to a degree. But when you totally look to somebody else, I don't care if it's your husband or your wife or your best friend, they are never going to love you on that level totally. They don't have the capacity. All right, look at this in Luke chapter 17 and verse 11. This story always amazes me. Luke chapter 17, verse 11. Now it happened as Jesus went through Jerusalem that he passed through the midst of Samaria and Galilee, and there entered a certain village. There met him 10 men who were lepers that stood afar off. And they lifted up their voice, and Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. They had a need. You know, Jesus could have folded his arms and said, what do you got? You guys got an offering to give? I mean, what is it you can do for me? Will you come follow me? Will you at least join the church? Will you at least be faithful to the ministry? He said, Jesus, have mercy on us. All right, so he goes on, and Jesus said to them, go show yourself to the priest. And so it was as they went, they were cleansed. They got what they needed. And one of them, when he saw that he was healed, he returned with a loud voice and glorified God, fell down on his face at Jesus' feet, giving him thanks, and he was a Samaritan. So Jesus answered and said, were not the other 10 cleansed? Where's the other 9, right? He never saw the other 9 again. He met their need, but he never saw 9. One out of 10, that's probably a pretty good percentage. 1 out of 10 came back. Listen, when you embrace your divinity, you connect to the one source and you give no expectation of return. That means you can't demonstrate disappointment. That means you don't get emotionally drained when you don't get back from somebody what you've invested in them. Now, what I'm teaching you this morning, and I'm done, but what I'm teaching you is really the line in the sand between professional ministry and multitudes that are coming into this Christ is us life, embracing their divinity. Now, this last scripture in Matthew chapter 20, Matthew chapter 20 is, illustrates it so good right here. Matthew chapter 20, verse 20 through 22. Matthew chapter 20 and verse 20. The mother of Zebedee's sons came to him with her sons, and they knelt down and they asked something from Jesus. Jesus said, what do you wish? He said, I want you to grant that the sons of mine may sit, one on your right hand and the other on left in your kingdom. All right, so they wanted something from Jesus, right? They wanted position. So Jesus said this in verse 22. He said, you don't know what you're asking for. Are you able to drink the cup that I'm about to drink and be baptized with the baptism that I am to be baptized with? And they said, yeah, we're able. They wanted position. They wanted something from Jesus. You know what Jesus said? Jesus said, in effect, the baptism and the cup that I'm drinking of, here's what he's saying. He's saying, can you love like I love without expectation of return? If you can love without expectation of return, you wouldn't be asking me for positions on the right and the left hand. You would simply come and love. Now, Jesus asked the question, are you able? Now, let me answer that for you this morning. I know you're not able. But the real question is, are you willing? Because He, and He alone, is the one that will enable you. So the lesson today, the message today is very simple. The message today is to embrace your divinity. We've got to be moved with compassion. We've got to bring healing to the nations. But to do that, we have got to transcend, and we've got to no longer look to man to supply what only the Father has freely given. Can you handle that? Can you receive all that? All right. I'm going to hook up to this next Sunday morning, and we'll just continue right on. But I think that's enough for today. I look forward to seeing you Wednesday night. Wednesday night, we'll talk about this a little further. Join me on my Facebook Live at 8 o'clock Central Time, Wednesday night. God bless you. Have a wonderful week. We'll see you next Sunday morning at the Digital Cathedral.